In 1963, Agent 007 is back in the second installment of the James Bond series. The movie is titled From Russia with Love. This time he's battling a secret crime organization known as Spectra. Russians Rosa Klebb and Kronstein are out to snatch a decoding device known as the Lector, using the ravishing Tatiana to lure Bond into helping them. Bond willingly travels to meet Tatiana in Istanbul, where he must rely on his wits to escape with his life in a series of deadly encounters with the enemy. Following the success of Dr. No, United Artists greenlit a sequel and doubled the budget that was available to the producers. In addition to filming on location in Turkey, the action scenes were shot at Pinewood Studios and in Scotland. They really had to rush to meet their scheduled release date of October 1963 because the production ran over budget and over schedule. There's no doubt this is quintessential Bond that you see in this movie. And even though it's only the second installment of the franchise, you've already started to see these incredible things that form to make this a Bond film. All the iconic identifiers are starting to show up and are there. Although initially he had reservations about the choice of Sean Connery for the part of James Bond, Ian Fleming just wasn't sold on the fact originally. He eventually became completely won over by the actor. And in fact, as a result, Fleming added Scottish ancestry to Bond's character in the later novels. Sean Connery really called this movie his personal favorite of the Bond films. And this was an important movie, too, because it was the final James Bond movie that was viewed by the author, Ian Fleming. Now, this movie broke crazy box office records, and it in itself was responsible for completely launching Sean Connery as a major star. He made progress in Dr. No in 1962, but this is what set him in the record books and moved his career along swiftly. Now, there were a couple of scary moments, especially one that was toward the end of the film. While they were making the helicopter sequence, an inexperienced pilot flew the chopper really too close to Sean Connery and scared everybody to death. This pilot should not have been piloting this helicopter for this shot. The production company was deeply concerned about it and made adjustments so that this didn't happen again. Another instance was when a helicopter carrying the director, Terrence Young, crashed over water during filming, and it trapped him in an air bubble for a considerable amount of time in the chopper's canopy. He was immediately rescued, and then, believe it or not, he immediately went back to work behind the camera with his arm in a sling. He had kind of boogered his arm up a little bit, but other than that, he was okay. It's said that Sean Connery learned to really love golf after he was introduced to it by Robert Shaw while they were making this movie. He completely fell in love with the game. Now, this is where Sean Connery starts to wear a hairpiece, and he continued to wear them throughout the rest of the Bond series. It wasn't that he was completely bald, but his hair was just thinning, and it didn't photograph well. This is the first James Bond film to feature John Barry as the primary composer. This score allegedly still contains riffs from Monty Norman's work on Dr. No in 1962. Barry didn't feel like that he got complete control of the soundtrack until he did Goldfinger in 1964, where he had complete creative control over the music. President John Kennedy listed Ian Fleming's book as among his top 10 favorite novels of all time. That list was published in Life magazine in March of 1961. According to the book Death of a President in 1964, this was the last movie that JFK ever saw in a private screening in the White House, November 20th of 1963. And not only was John Kennedy a big fan, Steven Spielberg was too. He's a noted 007 fan. And he liked Robert Shaw so much in this film that he decided to cast him as Quint in Jaws in 1975. Now, Sean Connery dressed well in these shows. He was outfitted with 8 specially tailored Savile Row suits. Each one of them cost about $2,000 to make. Now, the producers were hoping that there would be an end to the Cold War. You got to realize at that time in America's history, things were pretty tense between us and Russia. And the producers didn't want to stress that tension any more than they had to. So for this movie version, they made the nemesis a fictional crime organization called Spectra. This movie marks the last appearance of Sylvia Trench, played by Eunice Grayson. This character appeared in Dr. No in 1962, and the original plan was for Sylvia to appear in each movie as Bond's regular girlfriend, continually frustrated when Bond is called away for his next assignment. This idea was obviously scrapped. The collapsing rifle given to Bond isn't a gimmick, but was an Armalite AR-7 survival rifle, which was a production item which actually does disassemble and fit into its stock. But the one thing it does that's different is that it fires 22 long rifle cartridges, not the 25 caliber that he stated in the movie. It's one of the few firearms that will float when dropped into water. Now, in 1962, on The Tonight Show, Robert Shaw said that he was required to stand on a wooden box crate, basically an apple box, when he was filming scenes opposite Sean Connery. And the reason for this was that he was 4 inches shorter than Connery. He just looked ridiculous standing next to him. The love scene that showed up between Sean Connery and Dalla Bianca caused some real censorship problems in Britain. In the scene, a sweating Spectre cameraman films James Bond and Tatiana in bed from a cabinet. The British Board of Film Censors mandated to the producers that the voyeurism in the scene was just too explicit, and to keep the footage of the cameraman as minimal as possible, or they risked having the whole sequence censored. Another accident happened on the way to the shoot of this film. Dalla Bianca's driver fell asleep during the commute to a 6 a.m. shoot that they were filming. He crashed the car and the actress's face was bruised. They had to delay scenes that she was in for 2 weeks for the facial contusions that she had suffered to heal. A lot of people got banged up in this movie that shouldn't have. Now let's talk about the rats they have in the movie. I find this pretty fascinating. They originally coated all the rats with chocolate, as these were lab rats and they needed them to look like sewer rats. However, the problem was they wouldn't run. They just sat around licking themselves. They finally used non-lab rats, but they had problems with them too because they wouldn't run in the right directions. Now let's talk about Pedro Armendáriz. He was terminally ill during the entire time that he was filming this movie. He had cancer, which everybody knows that he likely contracted while filming the notorious movie The Conqueror in 1956. And this was done really near the site of the U.S. nuclear test sites in the Utah desert. The only reason that Pedro accepted the role in this movie was as a means of providing financial security for what he knew was going to be his widow and his family. The movie's schedule was altered in order to film his scenes while he was physically able to do it. Towards the end of the filming of his scenes, such as the Gypsy Camp battle sequence, the director Terrence Young had to use a double to act for the actor in some of the long shots. He was struggling terribly to get through this picture. And your hat just has to go off to this guy for his courageous efforts. 1 month after all his scenes were completed, He was placed in the hospital in Los Angeles in the terminal stages of his disease. He found this too much to handle and decided to take his own life in the hospital there in L.A. This is a sad, sad story that probably maybe should have never happened had they not filmed that movie in 1966 and been exposed to all the radiation that they were near. I find this movie to be smart, fast, and shrewdly directed, and it's performed by some excellent actors at the top of their profession. I suggest that you revisit From Russia with Love. You might really enjoy it more the second time around, or maybe it's the third, fourth, or fifth time. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.